Hi, everybody. I'm Yanir Rubinstein. I'm a mathematician, and we're here at Beneath the Surface, where we do in-depth interviews with geometers and other mathematicians. Today we have Scott Wolpert, very well-known geometer, professor at the University of Maryland. He did his undergraduate degree at Johns Hopkins University, his PhD at Stanford University. He has won numerous awards and accolades, and his work will be something we'll discuss today. Welcome, Scott.
It's a pleasure to be here, Yanir.
So I thought we could start out by talking about what is the Riemann surface. Some of the audience have heard this term, some haven't. What is your take on that?
So think of a Riemann surface as where you have the ability to measure angles. So imagine a surface, and you're not given a way to measure distance yet, but you are given a way to measure angles between intersecting curves on the surface. And then there's this beautiful theorem that we all know, the uniformization theorem, which tells us that a Riemann surface has a constant curvature geometry. So either it has the geometry of the plane, or it has geometry of a sphere, or it has, my favorite, geometry of the hyperbolic plane.
Oh, so does that have anything to do with curvature?
Yes, so the hyperbolic plane, has negative curvature, and a fun place to start about this is actually Thurston's description. So in a space with negative curvature, if you build a fire to keep warm, it won't work because the space spreads out and expands so quickly that heat dissipates very fast, in fact, exponentially fast with distance, which is something we're not used to in the world we live in.
So you've tried that?
I've thought about it.
I see. One thing about interviewing you is that the mathematics you do and also the hobbies you have are somehow related through music. How is that?
I'm going to say coincidence. So Yanir's referring to, I was fortunate to be part of the 3-person team that solved the Mark Katz question of, can you hear the shape of a drum? And the answer to that is no. So along with Carolyn Gordon and David Webb, we constructed 2 plane domains that if you made drum surfaces from them, they play exactly the same notes, but their shapes are very different from each other. Yes, so here's printed out a picture for us. So these two, if you built drums from these 2 shapes, they would play exactly the same notes. And physicists actually did this with microwave cavities and found that they had exactly the same resonant frequencies. It's not immediately clear, but the proof that these have the same frequencies relies on the fact that these 2 domains are made up of a common tile. That is, there's a standard tile, and these are each made up of several tiles of that standard tile. And the proof actually hinges on that fact.
Were you drawn to that problem of Mark Katz because of your love of music?
So actually, no. I was drawn to the problem. I went to a lecture by Carolyn Gordon, and she had 2 3D models that play the same frequency if you made drums from them. And looking at the 2 models, you saw that you could flatten them, and then you got these domains. And I said to her, hey, Carolyn, they both flatten. They already have the same frequencies. They're going to have the same frequencies when you flatten them. And she said, well, we already tried that. It didn't work. I said, no, this has to work. You have to think about it harder. And then she called me a week later to very excited, saying, yes, it works.
One of the reasons I was excited to interview you is that I heard there is a Wolpert's magic formula. There aren't many such in mathematics. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
All right. So, Yanir, this is an opportunity to tell you about hyperbolic geometry. So, a model for the hyperbolic plane is actually to use the unit disk with this metric. And then a unique feature of hyperbolic geometry, two-dimensional geometry, is that you have right hexagons. And in fact, a right hexagon is uniquely specified by specifying the lengths of 3 alternating sides. So now, if you have a right hexagon, you can double it across alternating sides, and you'll get a shape like this, called a pair of pants. This has geodesic boundary.
So I basically take 2 of these and I glue them
Yes.
along the same decorations.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. So then you get a shape like this. It has geodesic boundary because these were geodesics. And the lengths of the boundaries are free parameters because here you could specify the lengths of 3 alternating sides. So hyperbolic tailors can advertise that they can fit any shape, fit any physique with these pants. All right. Now, when you have hyperbolic pants, you can actually start gluing them to each other to make a surface. And so when you glue 2, the 2 boundaries should have the same length. And then what are the parameters when you're doing such a gluing? The parameters are, at each gluing, you have that common length of the boundary. And you also have a twist parameter because these are isometrically circles. And so when you put them together, you can freely choose the relative rotation of one relative to the other. So there's 2 parameters at each gluing. These parameters have no restrictions. So the twist parameter is like angle for a mathematician. So this has values in R. And the length parameter just needs to be a positive number. So now we get to some very beautiful hyperbolic geometry. There's this beautiful theorem of Fenchel and Nielsen, which tells us that the global coordinates for the space of marked hyperbolic structures are in fact these parameters tau and L, and that they only have the limits or restrictions that I already mentioned. So tau takes values in R and L takes values in R+. So in fact, the space of structures is called Teichmuller space. So in fact, these are global coordinates for Teichmuller space. Now, when you're building a surface, there are different ways, combinatorial ways you could have put the pants together. So in genus 2, just to give you a sense, here's 2 different ways to put pants together. And these are different because this curve's separating this single curve, and there's no separating curve here, single curve that's separating. So the formula that I found is the following, and that is that this differential 2 form, d tau dl, is independent of the gluing pattern. And there's infinitely many gluing patterns. So in fact, this quantity is something intrinsic. So even though we made choices when we set up these coordinates, this differential form's intrinsic. And then it's a 2 form, so if you wedge it up, you also get a volume form. So this is a description of an intrinsic volume form on the space of structures.
Are there any applications of this magic formula?
Yes. In fact, the most striking applications are due to Maryam Mirzakhani. And to give one a sense of that, actually, I'm going to point out another formula that was quite a surprise. So there's this formula called McShane's remarkable formula. He's not the one who named it. And let me describe. So I'm just going to describe it for the once punctured torus. And so in each free homotopy class when you have a hyperbolic metric, there's a unique geodesic. And we're just going to look at those geodesics which do not cross themselves. And we're going to add up their lengths in this special way. And when you change the surface, it's known that every one of these lengths changes. So this sum, ostensibly, depends very much on what surface. Certainly the terms of this sum depend totally on what surface you're working with. McShane's theorem is that this equals 1/2.
Is this related to your theorem?
No, it's not. But let me just say, I'm just two or three words, and then I'm going to jump to what Mariam did with these as beginning inputs. So Mariam had a much bigger view and much much more vivid imagination. She looked at this formula and thought, oh, this is a partition of unity formula. So Mariam generalized this, because as it stands, it's only for one punctured tori. She did it for general hyperbolic surfaces. And then using it as partition of unity formula and using this formula, she was able to develop recursion formulas for the volumes of the moduli spaces. And these are exact recursion formulas. Now, those formulas are rather involved, so I'm not writing them down. But she got 3 very strong applications from these recursion formulas. I'm just going to now refer to one collection of applications. So she used these recursion formulas, and it also comes out from what's going on here that we're not just looking at volumes, we're actually looking at certain intersection numbers for the moduli space of Riemann surfaces. So one of just a small, simple application of her recursion is this asymptotic formula for the volume of the moduli space. And it's an asymptotic expansion, and it's an exact asymptotic expansion. Yes, these are constants which haven't been determined yet, but everything else is determined in it. So this beautiful asymptotic formula is just a small consequence of Mariam's work just on volumes.
So a magical formula as a consequence of your magical formula.
Yes, yes. Right, I would even say fantastic formula as a consequence of magical formula.
So we mentioned a little bit drums and music.
Right.
You also like to play music as a hobby?
Yes. So it's been a hobby of mine actually since like 6th grade or something. So in 6th grade, my uncle was a music teacher, set my brother and myself on playing saxophone. And I played saxophone, I don't know, for 4 or 5 years. Then I dropped that and then later played recorder and played a lot of Baroque and Renaissance music. Then I later stopped doing that. And then my children started taking clarinet lessons, and I joined them in taking clarinet lessons. And I've been continuing with that ever since.
Any other hobbies?
Biking, fixing bike, and also I work on math. As you know, I work on math curriculum projects. So in fact, I'm quite busy being retired.
Is there any chance we can convince you to play a little piece for us?
Sure. So this is actually one of my play toy instruments. This is it's called an electronic woodwind. You should think that it's a woodwind counterpart to an electric keyboard. And this is actually an economy model. I didn't want to invest that much in it. So in fact, all the sound processing is taking place on my laptop. which is why the laptop's here. And here we go. Actually, let me adjust one thing.
I've never seen this kind of instrument being played before, but it doesn't surprise me since you always innovate. What piece did we just hear?
So this was Over the Rainbow by Harold Arlen, and this is from The Wizard of Oz. And certainly the first singer of it was Judy Garland.
So we've had magic in math and magic outside of math. My last question is, if you could give young geometers one piece of advice, what would that be?
So I've thought about that, Yanir, for a while, and it's a very good question. And I think the answer is the following. And that is, geometry in practice and to be successful and do new things, needs to be thought of as an interdisciplinary field. So it's essential to know analysis. It's essential to know topology. It's essential to know the structure of Lie groups. So one can be a geometer, one can, I'm going to say, cannot be doing only geometry. One needs to very much use the tools and methods of the other fields of mathematics.
Thank you so much, Scott. It was a great pleasure to have you here in Beneath the Surface.
Thank you, Yanir.